Today on Locked On Suns, 3 late first-round players in this month's NBA draft have reportedly received promises. That happens this time of year, no different than any other year, but they all look like players the Phoenix Suns might well be interested in. So the question is, did the Suns make those promises? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome to the show. I'm Brendon Kleen, credentialed Phoenix Suns media member for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show. Welcome to Locked On Suns. Appreciate each and every one of you making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Wednesday. We're here for you each and every day. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube, so just hit that follow or subscribe button. Get a new episode in your feed every Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer. Get locked on to the Phoenix Suns all off season long and beyond right here with the show. Today's episode, all about news, free agency, the draft, even the coaching staff for the Phoenix Suns. We're starting with the draft, though. The Phoenix Suns have the 22nd overall pick. Last week, the week before, was all things Bronny James. We know that. I've covered it plenty here on the podcast, and maybe that still comes to pass. I can't say the Suns won't do something crazy like that. I can't say LeBron James won't do something crazy like that, but as we get closer to it, I think it's more realistic to look at players the Suns who may actually help the Suns, who would be a more logical, sensible thing to pursue than that. And there's 3 players that I already had in the back of my head who have received, apparently, potentially received promises in the draft, okay? And all 3 could be Suns candidates. Let's start with the one that I think is the least likely, the least realistic to happen here, and that's Devin Carter. Devin Carter is 22, went to Providence, combo guard, had a big breakout shooting season this past year, but other than that, even if the shooting isn't quite as elite as it looked here as I believe a junior or senior, he seems to have the size, the scoring ability, the motor to be a good two-way guard. He apparently has a lot of interest. He's moving up, but I think he's going to be out of the Suns' reach. I don't know if he's received a promise per se, but there's interest apparently from the Thunder. There's interest apparently from the Bulls. Those teams are picking 11th and 12th. You know, Kevin O'Connor's been big on him over at the Ringer all year. He'd be perfect for the Suns. I don't think he falls. Sticking with guards, Tyler Kolek is the other guy that's kind of in the news from a draft perspective with apparently some interest here as well. And this comes from Kristen Peak over at Yahoo Sports, who wrote today in her mock draft that there are rumors of a promise for Kolek in the first round, and the Suns make sense for the established point guard who found ways to score at every level this season. He can come in right away and be the lead guard for the second unit with how well he reads the game and facilitates for others. Now, Kolek also got a cosign from both Rick Pitino and from Sean Miller on X this week, who were talking up the senior guard. And here's the deal with him, okay? In a lot of ways, a very James Jones pick, in that he is older, coming out of Marquette, but also had a pit stop on his freshman season at George Mason. He's a 4-year player, got better every season, but you know, for 2 years at Marquette now was a 39+% three-point shooter with close to a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And yes, he's a point guard. You know, yes, he has a smaller wingspan, so to speak, but he's 6'3". So it's not like he's some kind of tiny guy here. And I wouldn't hate it. You know, I've talked all off season about how I'm not opposed to the idea of a point guard, but it's really about who and what resources are you spending to go get that player. I'm not really big on trading the 2031 pick or something, you know, or using Nurkic's contract even to go get a point guard who makes $15 million. I don't think it's worth doing that. I also wouldn't trade this year's pick to go get a point guard, partially because there's players like Kolek available who could just come in and be that for you. Longer length of team control and ideally a little more upside. So this is exactly the type of player that I think makes a lot of sense. There's also been this Johnny Furphy guy. He didn't, you know, he's not really rising or any sort of newsy, but he's a freshman. He seems to be a little bit more maybe of a sure thing, let's say. Similar, you know, somebody who might be able to kind of surprisingly step in and contribute. He is, let's see, how old is he? Jonathan Gavoni referenced him as a player that he could see teams. Yeah, he has Furphy 18th. Furphy will be basically 20 by the time the season starts, so a little older for a freshman, whereas other mock drafts like Yahoo have him, you know, closer to the end of the first round. I'm not including him in any of this news or the promise stuff, but there are players who have the kind of shooting and know-how on the court who might be options in this range, just like Kolek is. Yahoo has Jalen Tyson that he's kind of withholding some workouts and might be one of these guys. So I'm just going to combine them all into one. But the point is that Kolek apparently has this kind of promise. Nobody ever knows who these come from. And sometimes the player doesn't actually fall far enough for that promise to come to fruition. We'll see. The last one is DaRon Holmes, who is a player I've mentioned on the show already. And both Yahoo and ESPN have rumors that he has received a promise. Kristen Peak at Yahoo wrote, "There have been rumblings around the league regarding a promise for Holmes late in the first round, and sources say he's shut down all future workouts." ESPN also, they both have him going to, in that late first round region, 28 to Denver, actually, for both. ESPN's write-up says, sources told ESPN Holmes recently canceled several workouts, raising strong suspicions that he has secured a guarantee in the back part of the first round. The Nuggets part of this seems to be somewhat of a guess, but they do need a backup big. I think he makes a lot of sense for the Suns. He is like Kolek, an older player. He will turn 22 by the time that the NBA season starts, and he grew up, he was born in Goodyear, went to AZ Compass Prep. He's 6'10", so maybe not, you know, the size of some of the other center prospects in this draft, but has proven to have a little bit of floor spacing ability, which is nice to see. Now, it was really just this most recent season, only 83 attempts. He shot 39%, but he also improved from the free throw line. Maybe he's no knockdown shooter as a rookie or anything, but that's appealing. I have mentioned Kel'el Ware. He is the guy that I like the most just because he is 7 feet tall, really, really athletic, also has flashed a little bit of that skill level, but might be out of the Suns' reach. The Ringer has him pretty high, although that might be more of a mock draft thing. And then Yahoo has him, I believe, in the lottery. Yeah, 14 to the Blazers. Kristen Peak called him the biggest riser during the pre-draft process and has been working out well for multiple teams. Yahoo has, ESPN has him 23rd, and the Ringer has him 9th. Here's where I come down on all of this. The Suns being linked to any of these guys is a good thing. What I do not want to see in a mock draft is the Suns have all but telegraphed that they will be moving this pick before or on draft night. Well, they can't legally move it before draft night, but they could agree to something. I don't want to see that. If a trade happens, it happens. But I want them to give themselves to love. I want them to open themselves up to their emotions and fall for a prospect. Okay? I've said it before, I will say it again. We think of trading draft picks as being all in. I think sometimes taking a player who you believe in can also be a version of going all in. Who's to say that trading a pick is always what's going to put the most win now talent on your roster? Plenty of teams this year had rookie contributors on their team. The Pacers, the Thunder, the Mavs. It happens. And the Suns should not be thinking of trading as the only way to upgrade their roster for 2025. That's the bottom line. Any of these players sound great. If the Suns ended up with any of the guys I listed off today, I'd be pretty pleased. Next, the Suns all but confirmed to be signing Royce O'Neale, according to ESPN's Brian Windhorst. Why that is, the two reasons why that is a no-brainer, coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by BetterHelp, making therapy easier and more accessible for anyone and everyone. We all carry around different stressors in our lives, big and small, but when we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us in pretty major ways, and sometimes ways we don't even realize. Therapy is a safe space, though, to get those things off your chest and figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. Therapy has benefited a ton of people in my life, my parent, aunts and uncles, in-laws, my wife and I both. It doesn't have to be something traumatic or extreme or panicky. It can just be that there's something on your mind and you want to have somebody outside your life, somebody who's a trained professional and not biased, to help you out. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online, flexible, convenient, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with the licensed therapists, and then you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge until you find the person that works for you. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month and try it out for yourself. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's keep the show rolling. ESPN's Brian Windhorst on, let's see, let me get myself unblurred out here as we are dealing with me. There we go. Royce O'Neale, all but back. And Brian Windhorst, I trust. This is a no-brainer for two reasons. One, I think that the Suns should be doing, as long as it makes sense financially and keeps the team on a winning path, I am going to value continuity pretty highly in every single move that I make if I'm James Jones, Matt Ishbia, and everybody else this offseason. I guess it's like the tiebreaker. If I'm leaning toward one thing from a draft perspective, from a trade perspective, I want to keep going with what works stylistically, chemistry-wise, and everything else. So Royce O'Neale coming back, he's not going to be probably, maybe not even a starter on this team, might not play a ton of minutes every single night. He's by no means a perfect basketball player. He has weaknesses like everyone else. But I just like the idea of, hey, they got him in February. Or February, the deadline. So he has a 4-month advantage on anyone else the Suns could get this offseason. Plus, he's a lot better. And that's the other reason they should keep him, is he's just a good basketball player, and you got to keep those on your roster. The chemistry we all talked up between him and Durant, okay, great. Well, what happens when he gets a little more chemistry, moving the ball, spacing, just playing in a flow with Booker, Beal, all these guys after another summer and another training camp and another season together? That's just, It sounds basic. It is basic, but the Suns don't have enough of that right now. The other reason, maybe the bigger reason, that I'm in support of bringing O'Neale back, that it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I said it in my best-case scenario off-season, but it bears repeating. The best teams, they don't lose assets. They keep churning through. I think that's my big takeaway from a team-building perspective from the finals this season. Call it nimble aggressiveness, right? The Suns, unfortunately, already went to the furthest reaches of being all in, but fortunately, every offseason gives you the opportunity to kind of reset things. With O'Neale, the Suns have this chance where they can add another salary that's tradable. Obviously, the picks that they're getting access to is another part of that, but as it relates to O'Neale, I don't have to look much further than Dallas. Last summer, they know that they have this Reggie Bullock contract that is expiring. He is not really a valuable player anymore. Injuries and everything else just sort of added up for him. And okay, but we don't want to lose that contract. They had some picks to use, and they made something happen. They get Grant Williams. They trade a first-round pick. They get off the Bullock contract, couple seconds as well. Grant Williams doesn't work out. You know, him and Nurkic get into it. That time when the Suns went into Dallas and won was one of Grant's last hurrahs with the Mavs, getting the tech and ejection and everything else. But what do? They turn around, they turn Grant Williams plus another first-round pick into P.J. Washington. The Suns have the opportunity. Obviously, this summer, they could sign and trade Royce O'Neale, but obviously, if Windhorst is right, that's not going to happen. More likely is, just like when they got Nasir Little, and now he is a contract they can use in a trade with this year's pick or the 2031 pick, to go get something else. That will be what Royce O'Neale is at next year's deadline and next year's offseason. So, I ballparked it at somewhere in the realm of 3 years, 40, 41 million. I've kind of seen that number being bounced around in a lot of different places. Pretty much what's happening with that is it's just a touch more than the mid-level exception. It's a raise from the 9 or so million he made this past season. Obviously, he has some leverage here, given that he and his agency will know, hey, you kind of got to bring me back here. You just traded for me, and I'm your only path toward a salary here to get back on your books. Keep me. I'm going to get a little bit of money for that. But it all adds up to being a logical thing to do, and then you go from there. I'm not sitting here telling you I think that Royce O'Neale should be some sort of core stalwart part of the Phoenix Suns for the next 3 seasons, no matter what. But I think smart teams like that Grant Williams sequence of events going from Bullock to Grant to PJ, who's now going to be starting in Game 1 of the NBA Finals here on Thursday. That's exactly the type of thing the Suns should be in the business of doing. And keeping Royce O'Neale is step one toward getting back to that kind of flexibility. Let's close out the show with maybe some bad news, if you want to call it that, which is that the Phoenix Suns apparently made a call, or Mike Budenholzer did, to Darvin Ham, his former right-hand man in Milwaukee, who just got fired by the Lakers, and Ham apparently said no, which is where we got to David Fizdale staying with the Suns. I'll tell you why. The most important thing, just like, frankly, Budenholzer or any of the Suns players, is wanting to be here. We'll get into that next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Tuesday night, as I'm recording this, the Phoenix Mercury are playing. That'll be over by the time you are listening, but we do have the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are at home against the Giants right now. There is hitting a home run. There is getting a hit at all. D-backs total runs. I like the first 5 inning stuff on baseball because you can just bet more based on the starting lineups. And then, of course, in the NBA Finals, I've been telling you, Jaylen Brown Finals MVP. There's, Luka, Kyrie, Tatum points. There's exact series, total games stuff, all with plus odds. That's what you want to be looking for, especially before game 1, before you know anything. Check it out, all at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's close out the show. Darvin Ham. I tweeted all the way back I tweeted that if Ham came to the Suns as part of a package deal with Bud, I would like it even more. Now, 2 things have changed since then. One is that I'm really sold on Bud. I've really come to be even more hyped up on that move than I originally was. And so I'm less inclined to need some kind of, second in command guy or a defensive coordinator or whatever Ham would have been. I just liked the idea of more experience in that coaching staff and more familiarity for Bud. But the other thing that has happened since then is that he's gotten a couple of his other guys. So Chad Forcier and Vince LaGarza, and then I believe his name is Chason Randall, are all guys that he has familiarity with who he's been able to bring in. Those guys seem to largely be player development, skill development, kind of personnel tactician guys, right? Whereas Ham still would have been able to kind of be more of a game plan guy, a associate head coach type of person. But Fizdale seems like he's going to be that. And so to get those 3, to get Fizdale back, and then to find out that they swung and missed on Ham kind of makes it go down a little easier. But I'll say the same thing that I said about Bud and that I just said about Royce O'Neale to make the case for Fizdale, okay? Fizdale and Bud have never worked together before. I know I talked a little bit about the Fizdale hiring when it happened, but I would imagine they have some level of familiarity. They were assistants in the Miami Heat years when the Spurs and the Heat played in the finals, so of course they had head-to-head battles, and you coach in the league long enough, they've both been in the league since the early 2000s, if not before that. You're going to know your colleagues, so I'm not super worried there, but okay, maybe you could make a case. Ham could have obviously been a little more comfortable for Bud. But I hate to bring this example up, but it's like I did it when I was talking about the Bud press conference. Monty, who of course Suns fans know well, Monty Williams, got this job in Detroit, and I frankly don't feel like he wanted it. The reporting out there is that they had to ask him and beg and plead multiple times and then finally just blow him away with a financial offer he couldn't refuse to get him to take the job. I'm not saying that's the only reason that things went so sideways with the Pistons this past year. They were really hurt. They were inexperienced. Their roster sucked. But I have to imagine that Monty begrudgingly going there didn't allow him to put his best foot forward. So the fact that Bud chose the Suns after a year off when there were other openings makes me feel good. The same is true here. I wouldn't have wanted Matt Ishbia to make some kind of godfather offer to Ham just to get him to come be an assistant here. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Not disaster, that's extreme, but a recipe for failure. It's not too different, frankly, from kind of the odd couple of Kevin Young and Frank Vogel last year, right? So that's the thing. I like that basically they got Ham. I like the fact that they got Fizdale to come back on his own terms, to choose to be here. He was in the front office. He was away from coaching. He's done all sorts of things in the league. He didn't have to be here. He chose to be here. I think that'll go a long way. I think if Bud, gave the okay on that, then that's going to go well. And that's what I want to see. Okay, so Fizdale can continue to be one of the guys spearheading the defense. By all accounts, that was part of what his kind of role was this past year. That's what he's always made his bones doing in the league. And he, again, in addition to the wanting to be here aspect of it, the thing I said about the Royce O'Neale return just in that last segment that I think applies here is the chemistry side of it, right? Ham might have brought more experience, higher level experience more recently, and the relationship pre-existing with Bud. But what Fizdale brings is a relationship with these players. And even though Kevin Young was this head honcho in the assistant staff and this, offensive orchestrator and was paid very highly to be kept here in Phoenix, it didn't feel like he was this guy waiting in the wings to be a head coach here last season. Not saying he's going to be bad at BYU. I was the one advocating for him to get the head coaching job here. So it's not about Kevin Young. But Fizdale was the guy time and again, whether it was in quotes from the players or it was in on the court, in huddles, in in-game situations where we would see Fizdale taking that leading role. That's going to be immensely valuable. This whole thing was an experiment last year. I know it sounds like me giving excuses when I say that, but with the level of injuries, the fact that the whole roster had been turned over basically, and how many things went wrong along the way, 49 wins was decent. They fell apart in the playoffs. They fell apart numerous times during that 49-win season. But just think about what can be achieved simply from familiarity. And so it's part of what I said with the extension for Grayson Allen. It's part of why I don't want to trade the big three if I can help it. It's part of why you keep Royce O'Neale. And even if Fizdale is probably low down on the list of things that's going to make or break this Suns season, add him to that list as well. That'll wrap us up for the day. Enjoy your Wednesday, guys. Thank you for being here. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday, all off season long. We got draft news coming down, of course, like we hit on in that first segment. We'll have Steven Perjone to round out the week later on. Free agency not too far. Coaching staff still to be filled. Where else can you get all of it? Right here. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Again, enjoy your Wednesday.